Yes, I mean, the Indian example is interesting because there's a lot of money there in terms of the companies that are coming on stream, because India is such a huge market. So the interest, say, in India, for example, is you've got a huge population of students that are being seen to be not served at all by public education, let alone being underserved. So you've got companies like Byju's, BYJU apostrophe S, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar, and it's valued at $22 billion. And they claim to have, 115 million registered students. And it's very much based around this logic of private tutoring and, the tech firms stepping in where there is no provision. And so I think online tutoring, particularly to underserved and non-served populations, is a logic which clearly through the pandemic we saw coming to the fore in terms of even, in countries like Australia, middle-class families suddenly pivoting to online services to supplement what they saw as kind of mediocre public education fare. So I think this idea of there being a kind of shadow marketplace or a marketplace outside of the school system and the university system is certainly coming to the fore. And that's a logic that we should take very, very seriously. There was a kind of interest that China had banned online private tutoring companies last year, which I think is tied up much more in the politics of China and tech rather than any particular concern over the well-being of students. And I'm very wary about this kind of sinophilia where we look towards China as some kind of extreme version of dystopian or utopian technology. The logics of what's going on in China started in North America, started in Silicon Valley. So if we're talking about surveillance of students through facial recognition, that didn't start in China, that's taking place all around the world. So to kind of other what's going on in China or India is a bit of a trap in a way. But certainly like mass online private tutoring, Khan Academy on steroids, I think I would take that very seriously. What's interesting about a lot of the stuff that critically minded scholars are talking about at the moment, so there's this idea of, synthetic governance or AI-driven, decision-making and the rest of it in the classroom, is how much of it is actually vaporware, or what we would have called in the 2000s vaporware. I'm a bit skeptical about how much of this stuff actually A, is feasible, and B, is actually happening and is actually present. And there's a danger we get a little bit distracted by these socio-technical imaginaries which are being pushed by tech firms about education. They kind of distract our attention from the very real present dangers and the very real present ways that technologies are being used in classrooms. So I like Lee Vinsel, who's an STS scholar from the States, talks about critique hype, or what he says, he refers to as lending credibility to industry bullshit. So every time we suddenly start talking about what possibly could be the worst thing about having education in the metaverse, we're actually adding helium and pumping up the metaverse balloon and hyping it up. Whereas really, we should be talking about some of the more heinous things that are being done with actually existing technology. So if I'm going to talk about AI, I would like to talk what Siddharth refers to as actually existing AI rather than this imagined AI, and perhaps move away from what could happen to what is happening. But I mean, certainly data, automation, platformatization, those are things that are happening and we should be talking about. And in a way, those logics can be traced back to the hype of 10, 20 years ago. But yeah, this idea of critique hype, I think, is worth taking seriously. So yeah, let's look at India, let's look at China, let's look at what's actually taking place, where money's actually being pumped in and actually being made. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff still to be worried about.
So what you're saying is that we're all going to be pulling a lever in a virtual factory in the metaverse so that we can earn Bitcoin to survive. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. The trouble is, whenever you say anything, so even if you start saying anything, all people hear is education and the metaverse, or education and Bitcoin. So it's really dangerous to start kind of wildly, to even engage with some of this speculation. I mean, I'm only on Wikipedia, I think, once, and that's to do with digital natives. And I wrote a piece years ago saying, there's so much bullshit about digital natives and we need to debunk it. The bit that was read was, digital natives is a description of young people being great at technology. And that's what got picked up. So there is a danger that as soon as you say pulling a lever and pushing in Bitcoin, people go, oh yeah, that could possibly happen. And then people just, the promotion goes on and on and on. At the same time, we've got mass terrible use of online exam proctoring and software, which is really discriminatory and really kind of horrible, that people don't even look at because it's not the metaverse and it's not Bitcoin. So you're right, we need to kind of roll back a bit. And I think look at the ways technologies are actually being used. And most importantly, look at the ways that technology don't work. The technologies we have in ed tech at the moment, a lot of them do not work and are not capable of doing what's claimed to be that they're doing. And that's a real harm. If we're going to talk about social harms, I think what technology doesn't do, can't do, and isn't capable of doing. So if you have a system in a school now that allegedly gives you feedback on students' motivation or engagement or emotional state, that's clearly bullshit and it can't happen. But there was a great quote, I forget the name of the guy who said it. I'll have to kind of put it in the notes. But whether or not a technology is capable of doing what it's claimed to be doing isn't the problem. It's whether someone believes that it can. Adam Greenfield, that was right, Adam Greenfield. And if you've got education managers and administrators and leaders thinking, oh yeah, this is just a quick way of, getting around the fact that we can't monitor our students' engagement states, and you put in a kind of really crappy AI system that can't really do it, but it just ticks the box, then it gets implemented and all of the social harms that accrue from it happen. So we need to talk about ed tech not working, ed tech failing, what ed tech isn't doing, what ed tech isn't capable of, rather than, as you say, I doubt we'll ever see the metaverse in our lifetime, Alex. So I won't be seeing you there.
There's a lot of flim-flammery here in Hawaii and in some other states in the US too. I have a daughter in elementary school. So when the pandemic started and the lockdown became a reality, parents were offered to have their kids go to a fully online program, a fully digital program. And which we did not choose. We chose Zoom lessons with the teacher. And in fact, we sent her to a nature camp every day is what we actually ended up doing. So we're privileged enough to have the ability to do that. But the point I want to make is that this digital program that the state of Hawaii contracted for was called Acellus. And within a couple of months, parents, it was basically kids watch a little video and they answer these little questions. And that's that was basically it. That's the whole thing. This canned curriculum, these little videos, shoddily produced, no production value and no intellectual content whatsoever. But even deeper than just it being, shallow and vapid and empty, parents started sharing screenshots of content from these videos that had, overtly racist overtones. And then parents started asking questions. Well, where is this stuff coming from? And it turns out that this entire program was developed by this guy who has a kind of polygamous, he's sort of the founder of a kind of cult, a polygamous cult. And he was having what he called his celestial wives. I'm not making this up. His celestial wives were the people largely in charge of making the content for this online program. No one had any credential, no one had studied education or thought very deeply about education or anything like this. And it seems so symptomatic to me, this particular example of just, the flim-flammery and quackery that really, it's not just at this level, it runs all the way through the chain and until you get to Elon Musk, et cetera, et cetera.